Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we've got a wild one. We're going to dive right in and investigate a totally sensational claim that's been popping up literally all over the media lately. It's a fascinating and maybe kind of alarming look at our relationship with the tech we use every single day.
So here's the big question. Are cell phones mutating the shape of our bones? I know, right? It sounds straight out of a science fiction movie. But we seriously need to ask, is it actually possible that these everyday screens we're all glued to, our smartphones, our tablets, are physically altering the human skeleton? Could swiping and scrolling all day really cause long-lasting changes to our bodies? And I'm not just talking about a temporary crick in your neck here. I mean actual physical, structural changes.
The media has absolutely had a field day with this one. Experts and commentators have been throwing around these really colorful, slightly spooky terms to describe this alleged mutation. They're calling it a phone ball, or, get this, a devil-like horn. It definitely builds the mystery, right? It grabs your attention for sure. But as focused learners, we want to look past those clickbait headlines and figure out what is actually going on beneath the surface.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Skeletons Tell a Story. We're going to look at the actual biomechanics research from David Shahar and Mark Sayers over at the University of the Sunshine Coast.
So this whole debate basically stems from their research into osteobiography. Basically, osteobiography is the scientific method used to figure out what someone's life was like just by looking at their bones. It's built on this really cool, well-established fact that our skeletons aren't just rigid, static frames. They actually adapt to our lifestyles over time. Every single bone tells a story, laying down the foundation for how our physical, everyday habits leave a permanent mark on us.
And there's actually a super interesting historical precedent that brilliantly illustrates this. Way back in 1924, researchers discovered these unusually large skeletons on the Pacific island of Tinian. And why were they so huge? Well, the local stone structures were the big clue. By working with these incredibly heavy stones day in and day out, the islanders naturally developed bigger arms, legs, and collarbones. Their skeletons physically adapted to that heavy labor. Now contrast that with Shahar and Sayers' modern hypothesis. If lugging heavy stones shaped the islanders' bones back then, what are smartphones and tablets doing to young people today?
Which brings us to Section 2, the mechanics of Tex-Mech. Let's really demystify the biology here.
So what exactly is this supposed devil horn the media's panicking about? Well, in clinical terms, it's known as an EOP, or an external occipital protuberance. This is simply a growth of bone located at the very back of the skull. It acts kind of like an anchor for the nuchal ligament, which is super important because it connects your neck muscles right to your skull. So yeah, it's just a natural biological feature. Definitely a far cry from a literal devil horn.
So how exactly do our tech habits affect this anchor? Let's walk through this biomechanical theory step by step. You've probably heard it called text-neck. Step 1, you're checking your phone or your tablet. Step 2, almost instinctively, your neck cranks forward. Step 3, this craning forward puts extra sustained pressure on the exact area where the skull meets the neck muscle. And finally, Step 4, to compensate for all that added mechanical stress, the EOC actually grows longer, sometimes by several millimeters. It's like your body's literally reinforcing the anchor just to handle the extra weight of your head constantly hanging forward.
All right, Section 3, the X-ray data. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the researchers actually gathered the evidence to support their theory.
Because, you can't just guess that people's skulls are changing today. You have to look at the hard clinical data. So Shahar and Sayers examined a bunch of up-to-date chiropractor X-rays from people ranging anywhere from 18 all the way up to 86 years old. Now, it is absolutely worth noting here that because these were chiropractor X-rays, a lot of these folks were often already experiencing issues like neck pain. But the researchers really wanted to get an insight into how our skeletons might be changing and what consequences that could have down the line.
And when they zoomed in on young people specifically, they noticed this EOP growth appeared to be way more widespread. Let's break down their 2016 study findings from a test group of 218 people. There was actually a really stark disparity between the sexes here. They found this larger EOP in 67% of the men, compared to just 20% of the women.
And guys, it gets even more pronounced. Fast forward to their 2018 study, where they massively expanded their sample size to 1,200 people. The results? Males appeared to be a whopping 5 times more likely to develop these enlarged tech necks. 5 times! This specific data led the researchers to point out how tech is affecting our bodies, warning that this elongated EOP is a degenerative process, basically implying things could get a whole lot worse for young folks if we don't change how we use our devices.
Moving on to Section 4, the skeptical backlash. So the crucial point is, not everyone bought into this. Let's impartially look at the serious criticism this study faced.
Because this report opened up a massive debate in the broader scientific community, and a lot of experts are definitely not convinced our phones are mutating us. Let's fire through the critics' main rebuttals. First, they point out the report just flat out isn't conclusive. Second, it makes some pretty big scientific assumptions to connect device usage directly to bone growth. Third, and archaeologists were quick to point this out, longer skull bones are absolutely nothing new in human history. They've actually always been more common in males anyway. And finally, the general consensus among the skeptics is that there just isn't enough hard evidence to prove you are turning into Hellboy. They argue the researchers might have just taken some well-established archaeological facts and kind of shoehorned them into their own modern explanation.
Which leads us to Section 5, Skeletons of the Future. Because whether you agree with the researchers or the skeptics, tech's impact is real.
Right, because whether Shahar and Sayers hit the nail on the head or the critics are totally right to urge caution, there is one thing we absolutely cannot ignore. Tech's dramatic impact on upcoming generations is undeniable. Even if we aren't literally growing horns out of our necks, our devices are causing some very real, documented degenerative issues right now. Just take text thumb, for example. It's basically thumb arthritis. Constant typing and swiping can cause your thumb to develop serious physical problems, very similar to the dreaded carpal tunnel syndrome. The physical toll of our digital lives? Yeah, it's very, very real. So how in the world do we prevent these potential anatomical changes? Well, I love this cheeky little piece of advice from the source material. Maybe a little more walk in the park and a little less Angry Birds. It's a super lighthearted but totally accurate reminder. Simple posture breaks, cutting down on screen time, and just getting up and moving our bodies in natural ways can go a really long way in protecting our joints and our skeletons. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a rather provocative thought. Ultimately, it's going to be the archaeologists of the future who get to make the final call on how this era of technology physically shaped us. When they dig up the skeletons of the 21st century, are they going to find spikes sticking out of the backs of our necks, or will they find other weird signs of our screen-obsessed lives? So, what does this all mean for you? What will future archaeologists say about your bones? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it gives you something to think about the next time you catch yourself craning over that screen.